Okay. Hello, everyone. We are back. We've got another episode of the Soccer Dad Pod kicking off here. Running this one out of the gate with a little Zeppelin from Coda. Felt like a Zeppelin kind of day for me. Woke up, a little chilly, sunshine. It's kind of a good mood for a Monday, so I kept the music going with it. Excited for today's conversation. We have an individual on the show today that knows a mountain's worth of soccer history, insight, experience, names, relationships, Rolodex, all of that combined. So much so that it's in a book. And we're going to be talking about his book. Thank you for coming on today, Dave Lange. I appreciate your time. I know we've been trying to make this work for a while, and here we are in 2023 making it happen.
Great. I'm glad we can connect. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, no problem. So I had been seeing social media posts in the usual circles, our soccer circles, because in true St. Louis style, you have a long list of friends that I am also friends with. And in watching some of the posts going into the fall, I noticed some mentions and references to this new book of yours. And the one that stood out was you were up at Amsterdam Tavern. Amsterdam Tavern is actually my boardroom, when I'm kicked out of my house. So I'm very familiar with the team and everybody there. And I'm like, oh, that's a really, unique topic, new thing, that being the book. And your friend Jim Leaker, who is a regular at the pub. I happened to come in a couple days later, and I mentioned I saw the post. And here we are. So let's just real quickly, why don't you start off with a hello, and let's just kind of skim the book a little bit, and then we can dig into some details.
Sure. Hello. First of all, this is the second edition. The first edition came out in 2011.
Okay.
And so much has happened in the last, 12 years now, that we really needed a second edition, and the timing was perfect with St. Louis City starting, and just a general resurgence in soccer interest in St. Louis. I mean, there's always been great soccer here, but it seems like the interest has just boomed in the last 12 years.
Yeah.
With the international games coming here, and now St. Louis City, and so it's a great time to get things brought up to date.
Well, let's get some X's and O's out of the way for those that are listening early on here. Title of the book and easiest place to pick it up, and then we can talk about the book beyond that.
It's called Soccer Made in St. Louis, A History of the Game in America's First Soccer Capital, published by Reedy Press, local publisher.
Okay.
They do a lot of local interest books. And it's available at all the Barnes & Nobles. Almost all the Schnuck stores are carrying it. They carry a display of Reedy Press books.
Oh, great.
There's some local bookstores like Left Bank Books and gift shops that carry it. It's on Amazon. So most of the usual places you can find it.
Is it on Audible?
No, it's strictly hardcover book.
Okay, so if it were on Audible, who would be the voice?
Probably have to be Bill McDermott. I mean, who else,
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yes.
Total sense. So edition 1 came out in 2011, which was, for all those of us that are close to the game here in St. Louis, we knew that we were still on the outside looking into MLS. There was, not that there wasn't good soccer occurring, there was, but there was definitely collegiate level locally, things like that. We were kind of missing the mark a little bit. What I would love to hear about is from 2011 to now, talk about what you've seen, some of the catalysts and some of the bigger events and some of the players and the games and the teams. Talk about this last 12 years and what it's meant, to St. Louis soccer.
Well, the last 12 years, starting with the Chelsea Man City game coming here. They sold that out almost instantly.
Yeah.
And then a couple months later, Real Madrid plays here, 54,000 people, the biggest crowd to oversee a soccer game in Missouri. And then Jim Cavanaugh takes over the soccer park, takes St. Louis Scott Gallagher under his wing, brings a men's professional team here, more international games, people taking notice, saying, outside of St. Louis, saying, wow, they're drawing a lot of people for these games. That might be a good spot for an MLS team. They've always wanted one here. The problem was there was never anybody with the money to do it.
Yeah.
So, and once that all fell into place, almost miraculously with the Taylor family and Jim Cavanaugh coming forward, it was like a snowball going downhill. It just kept bigger, bigger, bigger.
Yeah. So me and my other co-host, guests on the show, and a ton of off-the-record conversations, we've talked about this particular ownership group, you know, in relation to so many of the other MLS teams and other owners, Kroenke. And I don't think our local market, our local soccer market, what I would consider the more new or generic soccer fan, really understands how powerful this ownership group, how dedicated to the game they are, you know, compared to other ownership groups. Not only from a bottom line standpoint, the combined wealth is off the charts, but really their understanding of the game. You know, what do you think their impact is going to have on this team, not only out of the gate, but, you know, do you think that our, quote, learning curve entering into the league is going to be shorter because of the ownership group or not? You know, talk about your opinion on them.
You know, I don't think they knew a whole lot about soccer when I got into it. But the thing I really like about them is they're so committed to making this a local enterprise. I mean, not just the ownership group, but look at the food vendors that come into the stadium. They're all local people. They really seem committed to remaking that part of downtown St. Louis and sort of resurrecting the city, bringing it back. So I'm really impressed with their commitment to the city itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the location alone, you know, choosing that plot of land that we've all driven past thousands of times. Like, this is the dumbest ramp ever. Don't even have no idea where it really goes. And now here it is, that incredible campus. Have you had the opportunity to go around to some of the other MLS stadiums and academy sites, and, you know, thoughts on comparing and contrasting what we have rolling out to some of these other locations?
I've been to a game in Colorado, and that stadium, it's interesting contrast. It's way out in the suburbs. Yeah. And it's not that easy to get to. One thing that shocked me when I went into the game there, the parking was free. Oh, this is Stan Kroenke's team, and parking's free. You know? Oh, nice.
So he must have lost a bet or something.
Yeah, you know? Yeah. And Kansas City, I haven't been in the stadium, but I've been around it. It's a great stadium. Again, though, it's in the suburbs, and we're one of the few teams that have a stadium right in the city, and it's easy to get to from everywhere. Because I think no matter where you put the city, somebody's going to complain. You know. Yeah,
you know, it's funny because we were briefly talking about my trip over the holidays, and, you know, we were in Spain and Barcelona in particular, and then Madrid at the very end. You know, when you think about those stadiums, the Bernabeu and Camp Nou, they're smack dab in the middle of everything, and that's true of 90% plus of European stadiums, especially those iconic stadiums. And, you know, the MLS, what St. Louis has done is really, it's almost like an homage to how those stadiums do it. Put it in the city, put it around the people, you know, and it looks like it fits. That's one of the things I love about the stadium. It doesn't look out of place architecturally, the finishes, etc. You know, it's when you were there, because you were there for the Leverkusen game, correct?
Yes.
We've talked to a few other people that were there. How did you feel, being obviously a lover of the game and around St. Louis soccer in particular your whole life? How did you feel walking in there that night with the teams taking the field and the crowd that was there? You know, talk to me about that experience and what it meant to you.
Well, being an old guy who's been around a lot of soccer in St. Louis, way back even when the Soccer Stars played here in North American Soccer League, I mean, they're playing at Busch Stadium and drawing maybe 10,000 people, 15,000 people in a 50,000 seat stadium.
Right.
So it looks empty. Then they're playing their home games at Francis Field, which at that time was not a good place. Part of the stands are actually condemned and been roped off. So, I mean, it was just seeing that new stadium and relating it to what I'd seen in the past. It was like, this is like nirvana. You know, it's people who are younger do not realize how lucky they are to have a facility like that. I mean, the sight lines are unbelievable.
Yeah.
You're right on top of the action. You've got a passionate crowd. I mean, the St. Louligans and the other supporters groups filling up that north end. It was a fabulous experience that night.
So was there, did you have the same experience many of us did when you were in the stadium? What did it mean to you? Because I have to assume that no matter what direction you looked, you saw somebody that you knew, and there was a soccer person, or maybe that you knew they were a soccer person but didn't know them personally. How did it make you feel like being part of it? You know what I mean? Like where you saw ex-players, ex-coaches, you know, and what that means to St. Louis.
The best experience I've ever had at a soccer game, one of your previous guests, Steve Petcher, would tell you.
Oh, yeah.
The arena was like an unbelievable place. But that's indoor soccer, but it's indoors, 18,000 people. There were games, I covered them for the St. Louis Globe-Democrat.
Okay.
I could actually feel the building shaking. So, I mean, didn't feel that at St. Louis City Stadium, but I think we'll have that feeling once the games get going and, you know, it's warm weather and people are not freezing to death and they're hanging out and having a good time. I'm really looking forward to the chanting and just that whole atmosphere and making it a place where visiting teams do not want to come to.
Yeah, it's going to be loud, you know, in that style. And we do have a passionate. Well, here's the thing, you know, baseball, right? Everybody talks about Cardinal fans and how they're the most educated in baseball, and you know, where else can you get a standing ovation for a sacrifice bunt, right?
Right.
I predict that we're going to see some of that from a soccer standpoint, because we do. We have probably an unusually large percentage of attendees that are soccer people that have played the game or are close to the game. Do you envision kind of that an educated populace, so to speak, or do you think we're going to be rowdy and just running at you?
You know, that's a great question, because I'm really wondering how much people actually understand about MLS.
Right.
I think we know more about European soccer than we do about MLS, because it's on TV every Saturday and Sunday, and
Right.
everybody, and the World Cup was just here. And so it's going to be interesting to see how people react to MLS, because I think for many people, even though they know soccer, this is a new experience. I mean, if you've ever read the roster rules, I mean, you have to be a lawyer to understand them. It's crazy.
All of that is, perfect example. Today, I'm assuming you probably saw the post, the signing, homegrown player, Caden Glover.
Right.
Amazing kid. He is an 07. I mean, that's crazy. Like, I have an 08, and the two of them played and trained together, and Caden's he's a man. But they announced it. They showed him with Lutz signing the contract, and it's our first homegrown. And immediately I had 3 people text me, "What's homegrown?"
Yeah, exactly, right.
You know, MLS has, you know, so many nuances within its structure that a lot of people I think it's going to take them a long time, if ever, to really understand it. And my take on homegrown is simply, it's almost like right of first refusal. You know, you mark your territory. This is our youth, and the city now kind of owns the rights to Caden's future. You know, and which could be first team presence, you know, in the future. Could be a transfer to Europe. Could be a lot of different things. And those kind of nuances, soccer fans here, they're gonna need to like slowly figure that out, because it is unique to MLS in a weird way.
Yeah, I think what people will really relate to is if they do what they say they're going to do, is that being a hardworking, high-pressing, exciting team. I mean, the last thing you'd want to see is a team making 25 passes before they go to goal.
Yeah. Well, I now, in fairness, full transparency, I'm a Chelsea fan, so parking the bus and winning Champions League trophies is not a bad thing. So, but I get it. We the way the kids are already training, the way City 2 played, Hack's role as coach at that level, and Lutz's preferences, we're going to see a very high energy team that is going to be pressing 90 minutes. So it's going to be, for those that are new to the game, it will be probably more entertaining than a cerebral team
Yes.
knocking the ball around, to the tune of 90% possession. But so what? Let's talk about the league. Let's talk about the team, because one thing that you mentioned in your book is part of the title is America's Soccer Capital, or First Soccer Capital. And on social media, I tend to like to take the gloves off for fun, of course, specifically with Kansas City soccer people, because they have this insane notion that they are America's soccer capital. Can you explain once and for all why they're wrong and why we are?
If you go to the back of the book and look at the data and the page that has the number of people from St. Louis who play for the national team,
Right.
77. I mean, that says it all right there. I mean, Kansas City, I hate to knock it because it's a great town and
Sure.
they sell out all their games.
It's good barbecue.
Right, and but the development hasn't been there. I mean, they turn on a few players, but I mean, look at the last World Cup. Josh Sargent, Tim Reed.
Yeah.
There were games when we had two guys starting for the United States
Yeah, not only from the same club,
from
no
the same
less.
high school.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the parents probably in the same bowling league at some point, you know?
Exactly. So, I mean, just when I started to write the second edition, I started with the premise that what happened to St. Louis soccer? Why it was in such bad shape in 2011? Because we'd lost the Athletica, the women's professional team, and AC St. Louis, the men's professional team, in the same year. And when I started talking to people who knew what they were talking about, like Steve Tritchew and Mike Sorber, like, St. Louis has always been a great soccer town. I mean, we turn out players all the time, even in these supposedly dark days of the early 2010s.
Yeah.
We're still turning out great players. So, I mean, St. Louis has always been a great soccer town from that aspect.
Well, so I think I read somewhere, and you may or may not know this, it might be obvious, but since 1950, isn't it true that the U.S. national team in any World Cup has always had at least one St. Louis player on the roster?
Not quite, because there were, after 1994, it was like a dead spot in there. I mean, Brian McBride was from St. Louis, but he's from Chicago.
Yeah.
So he
Hoffman
doesn't
Estates,
quite count. So there's a gap from 1994 up until actually 2014 when Brad Davis played.
Oh, was that big of a gap?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's nobody from St. Louis. I mean, there were people like Brian McBride, obviously.
St. Louis
From
influences.
St. Louis University, but not from St. Louis. So.
But can we argue, or at least agree, that since 1950, Kansas City's way down the list from us?
Oh, yeah, for sure. In terms of developing players, yes.
It's funny because when you do start getting into jousts with Sporting KC fans on some of these fan pages, it's awkward, because when you do go to the tape, right, tail of the tape, just bring us some statistics. Give us a name, one name. We'll be good with that. It just never happens.
Yes.
It's always like, you Cardinal fans. Well, then it's like, well, you're a Royals fan,
Really. It's like, yeah.
So I'll give them the Chiefs, but at
Right.
the end of the day, this concept, I was hoping that St. Louis would land in the Eastern Division, because it made more sense for me. I would rather Chicago be our rival, than Sporting. Thoughts? Care either way, or
In terms of travel budgeting, they'd certainly rather be in the East. I know that.
yeah,
They're making all those trips way out west.
it's going to be brutal.
I mean, it's great. And there's so many natural rivalries. I mean, Kansas City, Chicago, we're not that far from Nashville and Columbus.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of teams within a couple hours drive of here. So I think we could have some really good rivalries starting up. as far as what division they're in, it didn't really matter to me.
Yeah.
I'm just happy we've got a team.
Yeah. So let's talk Lutz and the staff and the early activity, player selection, etc. Because here we are, because being a St. Louis soccer person, when you hear, oh, we're going to get a professional team and all this stuff, there are a lot of individuals that were like, oh, we're going to, a St. Louis coach and a St. Louis GM, and right out of the gate, Carolyn and the ownership group, they didn't do that. They went a whole different direction with Lutz Pfeffenstiel as the director of the team. What are your thoughts about how he's been approaching it, the type of players, the type of messaging? Because it's not St. Louis, it's not a bunch of St. Louis guys talking about St. Louis soccer. This is a global influence that is running our team. How do you feel about what he's done to date, and what are some of your thoughts as to the players and moving forward?
The important thing about Lutz is when he came here, he didn't come here with the attitude like, I know everything about soccer. He was very humble, and people I've talked to at the clubs said they were impressed that he reached out to them specifically and talked to them. And the first experience I had with him, I went to college with Tim Twellman at SIU Weathersville, and Tim works for the club. And one day when I was trying to set up an interview with Taylor, I went through Tim, because Tim being a dad.
Sure.
And he said, by the way, would you like to talk to Lutz? And I said, sure. So we called, and it was just a get acquainted conversation. And several times he said, if you think I'm doing anything wrong, let me know. And I'm thinking to myself, more about soccer way more about soccer than I do. And you're telling me that. But I thought he had a very humble attitude, and, he took the time to meet people and learn about the city rather than just coming in and, taking over and throwing his weight around. I was very impressed with that.
How are you warming up to the early player selections? We talked briefly about the anticipated style of play. What's your gut tell you out of the gate? Reasons to be excited, concerned, ambivalent. Where are you on the player side moving forward?
It's really hard to see till you actually see him play in an MLS game. But one thing I've tried to tell people is, this isn't like you can go out to the soccer park and sign 5 guys from Scott Gallagher or Lou Hughes or whatever. This is a world game, an international game. So you're going to get talent from all over the world. You have to have that perspective. That's your drawing point. You're not just drawing from St. Louis. So I think I'm happy with the fact that they've gone outside of the country to bring in players. I think they've made a really honest effort to scout a lot of people worldwide and come up with some interesting signings. Mm-hmm. They're not. When I talked to Lutz, he said, the first time I talked to him, I didn't bring it up. He said, people think we're going to go out and sign Messi. I can guarantee you we're not going to sign Messi.
Well, those whack jobs across the state thought they were going to sign Ronaldo. So we've talked about them. I'm assuming you saw that.
Yeah.
Like, there was no way, 0% chance. When he's being offered basically $250 million, that just wasn't going to happen. But Lutz, I love what he's doing, and I think to your point, understanding that the game is a global game, MLS has certain rules and mechanisms that allow you to go overseas and build these teams. And how he has avoided using the designated player, another kind of MLS thing. It really is inspiring to me, because it tells me he's super focused on this style of play, bringing in a balance of players that have European experience in particular to mentor, really, this integration of new players. That's what I'm excited about. And the other thing is just to, tell me if you kind of see the same thing, or when you look at a lot of other MLS teams, there's this huge, what I call the CONCACAF effect or CONCACAF influence, Central South American players. It seems as if our player base is leaning more Euro than Latin. Thoughts on that?
I was happy to see that, because I think people will relate to this more as an international game when you have people because they watch so much European soccer. Here we've got some guys from the Bundesliga coming over and people at that level. I'm happy that they're taking a sort of a Euro route. And the guy they signed from the Kaiser Chiefs, I'm excited to see what he can do.
Yeah.
Because I've just because of the name, it's a unique name, and I follow him a little bit, and I was happy to see that they got somebody from there too.
So let's talk real quickly then from a player standpoint. The 30th pick they took from SLU. Oh my God! Josh Klein. Thank you. And then obviously now at the other end of the spectrum, the news that came out today with Caden Glover as a homegrown player. On previous episodes, we've talked about what it will mean, what will happen whenever a St. Louis player, ultimately and eventually lands on that team and starts to run. One of the comments I saw today I think it was on Instagram, there was a bunch of, and kind of looking at the profiles, it was teenage kids that were playing at the local clubs, and immediately they're like, I need Caden's jersey. What do you think, or what do you see happening with that first St. Louis player that really steps on and becomes integral to what City does on the field? What kind of status are they going to have immediately in the St. Louis soccer scene? Because we love our guys, right? Tim, Sargent in the World Cup. It's like, whether you like the game or not, if you're a St. Louis and you love them, what do you talk about when St. Louis players are playing on the St. Louis team in that league in our stadium?
I think it creates an instant identification with the team because guys are like under the age of 25, and women, guys and gals who are playing, they know Caden. Let's go see Caden play.
Yeah.
And if he actually gets in some games, I mean, it's gonna create a lot more, I think, enthusiasm than if it's just 11 guys they've never heard of. So that's important. My crazy idea 6 months ago, before he started having a good season, was, man, they could sign Josh Sargent, local guy, forward, face of the team, wow. Obviously, I don't think that's going to happen because he's doing really well.
Yeah, his star got a little brighter.
Yeah, and I thought maybe Tim Ream might come here for kind of finish out his career, but my God, that guy's having such a great season.
So, true story, this was about 2 years ago or so, over at Amsterdam Tavern. A friend brought Tim in, and we were doing kind of a live show down there, similar. It's just a soccer podcast live, watching a game and just talking. And he brought Tim in, and Tim agreed to jump on and let me and Rob Stelzer have a chat with him. And I brought that up. I'm like, okay, let's. These stars seem to be aligning, Tim. You're local. You've had a tremendous career. You continue to play at a high level. You heard we just got a new team, talking about City SC coming down the pipe, and it just so happened that the timing of his contract at the time is the one that is ending now, and I brought all that up, and he point blank, respectfully said, that is not my goal. My goal is continue to play at the highest level possible, and if I can stay even in the championship, that's a higher level than going back to MLS. And at first, a couple people there after the fact, they're like, well, that seems a little odd or it seems a little dismissive. But, that's the truth. That's the reality of the situation right now.
Yeah.
So I guess here's where I'm going with this. MLS continues to improve. It continues to become more competitive within the league and regionally in some of these friendly tournaments, etc. What do you think it's going to take to get it over the hump, to instead of signing the quote designated star players from Europe at 34, 35, 36, what do you think MLS needs to do to legitimately see these players in their mid-20s?
I think it needs these teams to be successful when they play outside the league in cup competitions. Against the North American and South American teams. I mean, they have to be the best, I think, in their hemisphere first for people outside of the United States or the so-called soccer aficionados start taking them as a serious top 5 league. I mean, I've read that that they're maybe the 10th best team in the world. I don't know how accurate that is, but obviously they're not on the same level yet with the elite leagues.
Yeah.
So it takes them proving that they can play on the same field, and not just play on the same field, but dominate the teams in this hemisphere. I think that's going to be a big difference in making MLS more well respected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, it's halftime here, and the line has shrunk. All that little chatter in the background, people, is St. Louis Bread Company. I don't call it Panera. We're at St. Louis Bread Company here. Dave looks thirsty. We're going to get him some coffee here real quick, and we'll be right back, talk more about the book, about soccer history, and who knows where this goes. So we'll be right back. Talk to you soon.
Hey everyone, JB here with Soccer Dad Pod. This break is intended to be both informative and an opportunity. Little did you know that we are accepting sponsors. Really. And as a sponsor of the show, you would get to talk to a demographic primarily consisting of parents, some soccer fans, and most definitely drinkers. Consider this an opportunity to let our listeners and social media followers know what it is you do and why you deserve some of their money. If interested in this incredible opportunity, just email us at soccerdadpod@gaslightstl.com. Now, back to the mindless banter.
All right, we're back. I am purposefully playing this rock and roll classic anthem, Wind of Change, from the Scorpions here. Everybody remembers this, remember? Right?
For sure.
It's funny, this song has come up a few times recently for me for different reasons. Number one, there's a podcast out called Wind of Change on all the usual suspects, Spotify though. And if you're a espionage, CIA, Cold War lover, it's an unbelievable podcast because the premise is very simple. Where it started, the host of the podcast had friends that were in clandestine services, and the theory is that he's exploring, and I'm not to the end of it yet, is that the CIA wrote that song, Wind of Change, for the Scorpions, a German heavy metal band, during 89-90 to help try and win the Cold War. So, Wind of Change, and we all know what happened. We all saw the videos of the Berlin Wall falling and all that, and you could not get away from that song. And joking with a friend the other day, we were talking about the podcast and the song, and he's like, it's kind of like soccer in America. Like, it's all changing, right? In the first half of the show today, Dave, you and I were talking about kind of City SC, and we didn't use the term changing of the guard, but let's be clear, there is a definitive changing of the guard, within the St. Louis soccer scene. So what I want to do now is kind of open it up a little bit, and we skipped right past your own background. You tell me, who are you? Where are you from? Your initial love affair with the game. Where'd that all kick off? And walk us up to, this huge endeavor that you've taken on in 2011 and now with the second edition of the book to write these books. You got to be a special person and have a special love affair with not only the game but this city to do that. Where'd that all come from?
I grew up in St. Louis, and if you grew up in St. Louis, you grew up with soccer, right? I mean, even though I didn't play on a organized team, we played pickup soccer a lot. Almost as often we'd play football or baseball. I grew up in Kirkwood. I went to Vianney at a time when they didn't have a soccer team.
Okay.
The basketball coach was Mike Villa.
Oh, okay.
Who was
turned into
wound up being the head coach and winning 7 state championships at Vianney.
I was a Granite City kid, so I played under Gene Baker.
Yeah.
So I'm very familiar with Coach Villa.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing team.
Yes. And so when I was in high school, I played football, and when I was a senior they needed somebody to write up about our football games. For that time, the Weekly Journal newspapers were big in St. Louis. They had their own sports section. So I started writing that, and that's how I got into journalism.
Okay.
And then when I worked at the Journal, the sports editor, a guy named Greg Marisek, didn't really want me to go away. So he actually contacted Bob Gelker, who was a soccer coach at SIU Eversville. SIU had the only journalism program in St. Louis.
Right.
And said, I've got this guy, you think you can help him out? And Bob, bless his soul, gave me one of his tuition waivers to go to SIU. So
Nice.
I worked in sports information, and at that time, SIU was one of the top couple, 2-3 teams in the nation. It was always them in St. Louis U every year.
Yeah.
So through that experience, I met Bob Gelker. Pat McBride was the assistant coach. All the guys in that era who came through, like Greg Villa and Tim Twallman, and later on, after I left, Don Ebert, guys like that. I mean, they were producing tremendously talented soccer players.
Yeah, we had Ed Gedmeyer.
Yes, Eddie
on the show.
Eddie was on the team with Don Ebert.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's tremendous. When most people think of collegiate soccer in St. Louis, obviously SLU is the first breath. The second breath, if you're truly a St. Louis soccer person, is usually one of the JUCOs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the third is inevitably SIUE and what occurred during those years, etc.
Yeah, and being at SIU and also writing about soccer for the Journal, I had to also write about St. Louis U, so I got to meet Harry Keogh. I mean, what a great guy Harry was. I mean, you could call him any time of the day or night, and he would talk to you.
Yeah.
And Ty Keogh, Dan Flynn,
Oh wow,
who was playing then, and all those great players. Danny Counts. Wow, I mean, Al Trost. I mean, what a lineup they had. I mean, I remember I was talking to John Carenza, who's the leading scorer in SIU Eversville history, played in the late 60s at SIU, and he said, St. Louis U's second team could have beaten anybody in the country, much less their first team.
yeah.
So, I mean, the SIU and St. Louis U were just great teams. UMSL, Quincy. So I got, covering all those people, I got to know all those guys. When I went to the Globe Democrat, when the Steamers came, Pat McBride specifically asked the sports editor, hey, could Dave cover us? And bless Pat's soul. And so through that, again, I got to meet all those guys who I, not just guys I knew from college who were playing for the Steamers, but guys who came in. Slobo Ilievsky, he's like one of the most memorable people I've ever met.
Yeah.
And Tony Glavin, people like that.
Carl Rose. Redmond Lane.
Carl Redmond, great guys. So through that, I met all those guys, wrote about soccer. I wrote for Soccer America magazine as well. And then when the Globe Democrat went into business, I went into corporate public relations. But I started coaching my son's team at Bush. So I coached that team for 12 years. And then out of the blue, Reedy Press decided to do a book about the history of soccer in St. Louis. At that time, Jeff Cooper was trying to get an MLS team in St. Louis.
Granite City guy.
Yes. And he approached Reedy Press to do a book. He wanted to have it ready for when his MLS team started.
Oh, wow.
So they started contacting writers, and that's how I got involved writing that book. So it's been a long, strange trip.
Yeah, well, okay, so to prep for first edition, do you keep copious notes? Did you already have kind of the book written in a sense through your years of writing and your own notes? Did you have the template and everything ready to go, or going into the request, was there a particular angle or a message or something that you were trying to achieve with the book outside of what you had already done as a writer?
Well, I was fortunate all those years of covering soccer. I'd made all these contacts and relationships with key soccer people in town.
Sure.
And so, not that I was a genius or an expert at knowing about the history of soccer, but through them, I learned about it. And there'd never been a book done about the history of soccer in St. Louis. The only thing that had ever been done was a PhD dissertation by the baseball coach at St. Louis U High. And I got a copy of that, but it only went up to 1965. So, I mean, I knew these people, and I could contact them and get the interviews, but the facts were really difficult to find. Luckily, the archives at SIU Edwardsville has a huge collection of historical soccer material that was collected over the course of almost 80 years by a guy named Hap Meyer. And he was related to Monsignor Meyer, who was a big soccer guy in St. Louis. I mean, at Mary Magdalene Parish. I mean, he was, and with the CYC, he gave all that stuff to SIU. And over the course of about 2 weeks, I went through all these boxes of stuff. Had a lot of great information. So it was a lot of legwork, a lot of interviews, and a lot of looking through all this
microfiche
stuff.
And
yeah.
So if you don't follow Dave Lange on Twitter or any of the other socials, because this is really kind of a comment and a question rolled all into one. And I think you might have just answered it, but almost on a daily basis. In fact, it is a daily basis. You put out on this day in, statistics and stories going as far back as, I believe I saw one from late 1800s, on this day, and, this team played this St. Louis team. How do you manage literally 120, 30, 40 years worth of these soccer tidbits of info and really our history? How do you manage that? How do you choose between all of it? Do you have favorites, or what's the process in putting out this information on our soccer history?
Well, the key development for any historian in the last 20 years has been a searchable database. It's now all the newspapers are online. All the St. Louis newspapers are online back to before the Civil War. So you can just enter some keywords and you come up with stuff. That's it's huge. That's how people found out that the first game was played here in 1875 at Sportsman's Park. And there's actually a mention in an advertisement of a soccer game in 1872.
Really?
So, it just goes back years and years and years. But that searchable database has been a huge help for researchers. And in the last 10 years, some really good books have come out about the history of soccer. A book called Distant Corners, which kind of breaks down soccer by location and by subject, and there's a big section on St. Louis in there. There's some other great books that have come out in the last 10 years. And through those databases, we found some interesting things, like the first league in St. Louis was in 1884. It's 3 years before there was a league in England.
Wow.
That's unbelievable. And
was it on the hill? One block against the next block?
Yeah, and it was a league called the Western Association.
Oh, wow.
Some Irish teams, some Scottish teams, and a German team. And then that same year, a team from Canada played here at Christmas Day against the St. Louis team. And I didn't know this until I started talking to people I know in the world of soccer history, and they said, we think that's the first international soccer game ever played in the United States.
Wow.
We have no record of any other international game played here before that. So St. Louis has had all these great milestones that I don't think everybody really knew about until we had this option, the ability to search databases and find out this stuff.
So did in the creation of the book, creating the book, doing the research for the book, did it take you to other cities, to other regions, or even potentially other countries for stories, for player engagement? And through that process, do you ever engage other regions, not combatively, but comparing and contrasting what St. Louis means to soccer to, say, well, Kansas City, we were joking about that earlier, but more relevant, say, like Jersey or Philly or some of these other cities. Has that occurred at all in the process of writing the book?
It all relates back again to this the phenomenon of online options of getting things. I mean, people started seeing my book or seeing my posts online. Historians, not just here in St. Louis, but in other countries, they would be contacting me, we knew St. Louis was a great city. Can you tell us more about this particular thing? Mm-hmm. Every year when the anniversary of the 1950 game comes around, invariably you'll get a message from somebody writing a book writing a story for some news media outlet wanting to know more details about that.
Right.
So Again, it's that global reach of online communications that's really revolutionized how research is done and how things are followed up once it's come out.
So through the process and the conversations, what stands out to you? Be it a player, a story, is there any story that just really kind of like maybe off the record? Somebody's like, oh my God, this is a character. You might know him for his PKs, but this, is there anything that just is like your favorite quip in researching for the book?
As far as like people I wasn't aware of until I just started doing research, there's a guy named Tom Cahill who lived in St. Louis for about 40 years. He founded the U.S. Soccer Federation.
Wow.
He brought the first team from England to play in the United States while he was in St. Louis. He was very instrumental in building soccer into a well-organized sport in St. Louis. And then after him, probably the person I'd like to know more about, and Harry Keogh raved about him all the time, is a guy named Billy Gonzalez, who's from the East Coast. He played here with Sticks Bear and Fuller for about 6 years. They won 3 consecutive Open Cups and reached the Open Cup finals 6 years in a row. And everybody who saw him play said he's the best player, American player ever, hands down, better than Pele.
Wow. Well,
I would like to know more about him.
Yeah, repeat the name again real quick.
Billy Gonzalez, Gonsalves. And anybody who played at St. Louis U for Harry will tell you that Harry would just rave about this guy.
Really?
Because he saw him play, and his brother played with Billy Gonzalez.
So along those lines then, you mentioned that you were kind of the beat writer, so to speak, for the Steamers, correct?
Right.
We had Petch on prior to the holidays telling some of those early day stories. How involved in the debauchery were you post game, post game? Talk about those days where the Checker Dome, the old barn, was just on fire, and how much fun was it?
Oh, it was the best time I've ever had in soccer. And the other day I posted something about the Steamers, and Petch put something on there about the best time ever for soccer, and he's right. I mean, just imagine Tim Ream playing for the St. Louis Ambush. Mm-hmm. That's what it was like. These were the best players in the country playing here for the Steamers. National team players. Ty Keogh, Steve Petcher, John Stremlau, an Olympic player. I mean, Don Evert, who was on the Olympic team and unfortunately didn't get to play because we boycotted the Olympics that year.
Right.
I mean, guys at that level were playing in the arena. These are like most of the roster was all from St. Louis. So chances are, everybody in the arena knew somebody on that team.
Yeah.
Personally.
So then in bouncing around the soccer scene, they were gods. I remember as a kid going to the game, and you would always get the little orange inflatable soccer ball, and it was the music, it was the pomp, it was the chaos. When that went away, were you still covering soccer at the time when the Steamers disbanded, and what was next? And how did that transition make you feel, or what did you think was going to happen to St. Louis soccer at that point?
I left the newspaper business in 1884 when the Steamers were still here. I mean, I went to watch them play a lot.
Okay.
But what was missing, there was no outdoor option for these guys because the North American Soccer League folded in 1984 for like 10 years. There was no outdoor league here.
Right.
So all these great players like Steve Trittschuh, Mike Sorber, when they were coming up through college, there was no outdoor option for these guys. So it was a huge gap of no soccer outside of the college level. There's some minor league outdoor soccer, but these great players, Steve Trittschuh told me, like, when he went to the World Cup in 1990, everybody's goal was get a job with a European team.
Yeah.
Because there was nowhere to go in the United States.
Brian McBride.
Right.
John Van Buskirk.
Exactly.
Some of the others in that time frame.
Yeah.
So following and doing all the research, and obviously such a hyper focus on St. Louis. Going back to the whole wind of change, right? And then we were briefly talking about this at the break. How does it make you feel, or what are you projecting your feelings to be moving forward with this new wave of youth players, the Caden Glovers of the world, with that stadium, with everything that's occurring, with not only the popularity of the game globally and that's trickling down into normal American suburbs? Talk about St. Louis moving forward. Where do you think we're positioned? How excited are you, or in any bold predictions on what it's going to look like moving forward?
Boy, it's like the great unknown. I really think about that a lot, and I'm like, I really can't say what's going to happen. It's there's so much enthusiasm now, but I'm like, well, what's it going to be like 3 years from now or 5 years from now? Is still going to be as excited about it. So I think that's why it's so important that this team, when they take the field, plays the kind of style that they say they're going to play. Get people excited, because with anything, the newness is going to wear off at some point.
Right.
So being realistic, I want to see where this is at 5 years from now, before I can really make a solid judgment on where we're going with the sport. I mean, you have to be realistic. I mean, soccer is not a big sport in the United States. I mean, you look at the statistics and the polls. I saw one recently, like 72% of adults don't care at all about soccer in the United States. I mean, we have to be realistic about that. It's a niche sport. So it's got a lot of work to do to get out there into the mainstream of America. I think it's in the mainstream in St. Louis, but outside of St. Louis, it's like, the great unknown.
Well, St. Louis, too, is we've seen it historically, time and time again with our other sports teams. We are educated about the teams we have, baseball being the best example. But we are ruthless if you're not putting a good product on the field, whether it's the ball diamond or the ice, and that soccer pitch is going to be no different.
Yeah, it's a results-driven business. I mean, sports is a results-driven business. You've got to have the results.
Yeah, I feel, we've mentioned it, with Lutz and the team's strategy. I'm not afraid of that. I've got other friends in other soccer cities, Chicago in particular, a group of them that are, talking a little smack on about time, that kind of, where have you guys been? I just think that I think we're going to compete. I think we're going to do more than compete early on. I think that the kind of that pedigree that we have within the water, so to speak, is going to be kind of an X factor that a lot of people aren't going to really attribute as real, but I think it is. So I'm really excited to see. I'm excited to see year one. There's no reason we can't go out there and be competitive to the point of. Well, let me ask you. What do you think a successful season one would look like, and what would be kind of like the result, so to speak?
It would be a successful year. They're going to be successful at the gate no matter what they do. I mean, they've already sold, I think, every season ticket they could sell.
Right.
But I think, for me, success would be making the playoffs.
Right.
Building that foundation going forward, having a good year, winning, at least half the games, maybe. I think people are going to understand they're not going to go out and win MLS the first season. Although they could, who knows? Right. But I think making the playoffs would be a big, big thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think making the playoffs is a reasonable expectation. I mean, that sounds crazy, like for an expansion team year one. We're not a normal expansion city, though. The facilities and everything are absolutely top-notch, and the pedigree of the players that have already been selected have garnered global success with national teams and professional European leagues already at this point in their career. I think there's that, and I'm really excited for Johnny Klein in particular. Anybody else with a St. Louis, with a 3-1-4 background, they step on that field and they do. If they start producing, they're going to be rock stars. They're going to be kind of mini gods in our backyard, and that's really exciting to think about because, there's a whole long pipeline of plenty of kids that are going to be doing the same thing.
Yeah, I know we talked about this being results-driven business, but the other thing about it, it's also a long-term thing.
Yeah.
You have 10-year-old kids going to the game and seeing this, firsthand. It's like, wow, I want to do this when I grow up. It's a whole new generation of kids that could be inspired to, play soccer and bring even greater glory to St. Louis.
Yeah. And what I really love about one of the other things City is doing, and really the other clubs have been doing it for a while too, and it seems like it's accelerating, Gallagher in particular with their Upper 90 program, is these clubs and organizations are starting to measurably reach into the more urban environment, the more depressed neighborhoods within the city, and they're helping these neighborhoods, helping these families, helping these kids. I see the potential of 5-10 years down the road, a whole new group of soccer fans, soccer athletes that are coming from the belly of the beast, that being our city. Think about Bevo, right? With the Bosnian community there, that's a market that is, so many of those kids have already been thriving within the club scene, collegiate scene, etc. Now we have this organization that's doing the same thing with north of Del Mar and in pockets of South City. With your, understanding of our marketplace, talk about what you see happening in really we're expanding the game within our own backyard. How does that make you feel? Because most of these neighborhoods have been excluded for 50, 60, 70 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited to see that City Futures program. There's also an organization in town called New Dimensions that's been doing exactly what you said for almost 20 years. Mm-hmm. They recently expanded into the North City, and the kids there are really excited. I went to one of their. What they do is they play 4-on-4, and you show up, you play. So I went to one of those last October. It was really exciting to see all the kids in that part of the town coming out to play and their first exposure to soccer and talking to some of the people there. And I'm like, this is great. We've never been exposed to this.
Yeah.
And there's a whole talent base there that hasn't been touched for years. Tom Mickler, who's one of the guys who runs New Dimensions, a couple years ago told me, do you know that from Cronolette Park up Grand Avenue to Interstate 44, there's 22 different immigrant groups.
Yeah.
22 different countries in that one corridor.
Yeah. And these immigrant groups, their number one sport of choice is soccer.
Right.
Yeah, it's really kind of like, it's almost like we're experiencing that, quote, wind of change, being cheesy on that. But, pick your analogy. The baton is being tossed or passed along. All this is occurring in real time. And I don't think any of us are really keeping up with just how expansive the development and the future synergy is within the soccer community here.
Mm-hmm. And historically, that's where the players have come from. When in the 1800s, it was guys from Ireland, mm-hmm. guys from Scotland, guys from England. Then it was the guys from Spain. Then it was the guys from Italy. And then the Bosnians and Mexicans came in. Mexicans more earlier than the Bosnians.
Ruben Mendoza and the rest of the crew on the east side of the river.
Right. And then obviously with people like Vedad Ibisevic, who's a spectacular player, and many St. Louisans may not realize that, but I mean...
Well, he went to Roosevelt High.
Right, exactly. Right. I mean, he scores against Argentina in the World Cup. I mean, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, he has a great resume, let's put it that way. I'm wondering if he's going to come here and work for City. It's interesting to see how that's going to turn out.
I mean, this goes back to when the team rolled out, Lutz in particular, and the staff. I think they're gonna bring anybody in that is qualified to be there. Mm-hmm. That will agree with the model, the business model. So Vedad, Yeah, he's a stud. He can play and he could score. Is he a good fit for our team? We don't know.
Right, exactly.
Because I think they're. It seems to me that they are going to be results driven out of the gate, and then everything else will be decided at that point.
It's easy for us to spend the owner's money, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's a whole bunch of zeros. I mean we could use a sponsor, enterprise. So let's. I want to ask your opinion. We're coming off of the 2022 World Cup. Messi finally got his trophy. The games were all over the board. There, the three things that stood out to me about the World Cup. Number one was the whole Messi debate and winning. The second would be really U.S. team, and in hindsight, now knowing the news from Reina and Berhalter, all that, like we had on paper talent, but it seemed like we didn't get the chemistry right, as is becoming even more evident after the fact. But then the third thing was really the role that the quote underdogs took in not only in the group stages but in the knockout stages, Morocco in particular. Those three things stood out to me. What's your favorites takeaways from this past World Cup from a player, team, game standpoint? What stood out to you?
The first thing, and you mentioned it, is these non-traditional soccer teams did well. It's good to see. It's not it's always Brazil and France and Germany didn't even get out of their group.
Right.
I mean, and when people say it's just awful, the United States didn't go any farther, I said, well, try being in Germany right now.
Or Belgium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Italy.
Oh, yeah. Who?
I have some friends who've gone to Italy, and they say it's like a national crisis, you know,
yeah.
their soccer program.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we did what we had to do. We got out of our group, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously there's room for improvement, but the fact that they, first of all, qualified after the debacle in 2018.
Oh, my God.
And then getting out of the group, that was important. So they've got a good base to build on. Those players outside of Tim Ream are young. So they've got a good base to build on. I just hope this whole Reina thing doesn't derail everything the good things that have happened.
Do you think, because I don't see any path forward for Berhalter to maintain his position. So let's assume the short lists have been made, new potential head coaches. Who do you like? Like what, either a name or a style of coach? What do you think is the best fit for us moving forward?
I don't know if he would be interested, but Bob Bradley's always there. And when Bob Bradley takes a team, who's his assistant coach? Mike Sorber.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they've got somebody there in the wings that they could call on if they wanted to, if he's interested in doing it. I don't know if he is or not.
Do you think they'll go overseas?
I think that's probably going to be their first choice. I mean, the fact that they went after Zidane, that's kind of shows where their thinking is, I guess.
Yeah. Tuchel's the name that I keep thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He's available.
Yes, he is. Absolutely.
Because the other part of the potential of a foreign national European coach in particular, you're not going to have the mom and dad issues that we had, recently. And I think that the other reality of the situation is, you look at our roster, you look at our top 18 to 26 pool, how many of those players are in Europe? Mm-hmm. 90%, 95% of them. So having a European coach kind of makes sense.
Absolutely.
Stylistically.
Yeah, there are a lot of those guys around, coaches.
Yeah.
They could draw upon. Yeah.
So the World Cup coming to an end. It was a great World Cup. We are looking at year one of City SC within the MLS. We've got a clear resurgence in collegiate dominance / competitiveness with Kalish and Slew. We've got Lindenwood is now going D1 too. All these things are occurring. What are you really looking forward to over the next year, 2 years, out of this St. Louis soccer landscape? Like, if you have your dream scenario, what does it look like?
Well, obviously, it'd be St. Louis City winning MLS maybe in their first or second year. I mean, that'd be a dream come true. But for me, it's also exciting to see what's happening. We talked about the outreach into the urban areas of St. Louis to kids who've never been exposed to it. That's going to be interesting to see where that goes. It may be the number one story in St. Louis soccer over the next 5 years. Does that happen, and what comes out of that?
Yeah. No, that's a great point, because St. Louis is always trying to find a way to look for wins. Athletically, really in just about any sport we touch, clearly baseball, our youth baseball programs around here are nationally relevant, constantly putting out professional players. Our hockey scene is just crunching out draft picks.
We don't do bad in the NBA either.
Don't do bad in the NBA. We don't do bad in the NFL. Soccer, we were talking about this earlier. We are arguably one of the most influential cities in the nation when it comes to developing players. But St. Louis as a city, we could stand to integrate more of the city into that process, because all the other sports we mentioned, other than football, really, you have very few players on a team or on the court or on the field or on the ice, and they can't get to the ice because it costs $72,000 just to get the gear. But soccer is a global sport for a reason. It's accessible. So I agree with you. I think the more these orgs find a way to integrate the true neighborhoods in the city, that could be really, really interesting.
And the other thing we haven't even talked about, which I think is a potential for a big story, are they going to bring an NWSL team here? A women's soccer. I mean, we've got like 2 World Cup players from St. Louis.
Yeah.
Becky Sauerbrunn, Lori Klupny. And I don't know if Lori listens to your podcast. If she's listening around, she's finding it's about time you brought up women's soccer.
She needs to check her text messages, because there's been messages sent. I would love to have her on. So clearly, if you wouldn't mind passing along a word, I would appreciate it.
And we have the World Cup coming up this summer.
We just said this on the last podcast. One of the things, we were doing a recap of season 1 going into season 2, and one of my comments was, we need more women on the show, because that, at the club level, here in St. Louis region in particular, our ECNL women, they are dominating. They are pumping out national championships. The pipeline of the girls leaving the Gallagher and Fuse clubs, rolling into D1, D2 schools. I mean, it's like the tubes in London at rush hour. They're all on that train.
Yes, and St. Louis City has to find other ways to use the stadium. I mean, here again, we're spending the owner's money, but a great option to get an NWSL team here playing in that stadium in the summer.
Yeah, because it's they're proving it. They're proving it on the field in the product. Right now, I think there's 4 or 5 local St. Louis girls that are all in the national team pool. And it's just a constant rotating cast of successes, and that should be illustrated. Inner city, more eyeballs on the women's side. The men's side is going to do what it's going to do.
Yes.
I think it's going to continue to develop. I think it's going to get better. We look at the clubs, we look at how these kids are training today. Just watching an average academy game at U13, 14, 15, it's amazing. I mean, there's some of these freshman, 8th grade teams. They could beat most high school teams in the area.
Yeah. Every time somebody asks me about St. Louis soccer, I go back to this quote I got from Shup Messing, the great goalkeeper for the New York Cosmos and the New York Arrows. And he played with a lot of St. Louis guys in the Olympic team, and he played at Harvard, right? So I was talking to him about St. Louis soccer, and he says, I had no idea until I played against these St. Louis guys. He said, they're the 800-pound gorilla. He said they're big, strong, but technical. From that time period, Al Trost, those guys, and Pat McBride, and, the 800-pound gorilla of soccer. That's St. Louis.
Yeah, it is, and it's been growing up here, being a part of it. Obviously yourself, your career embedded you in it. This has been a lot of fun because it really illustrates so many of the things that we talk about on the show often in regards to being a homer towards St. Louis and the St. Louis players, past, present, and most importantly, future. I think that the way that our soccer scene is structured right now, from the club level to the training level to the MLS team, all of the women's programs, and just the general interest in it. I mean, how many bars and restaurants are now claiming we are a soccer pub? And, none of them are Amsterdam Tavern. Let's just get that clear. But for a pub willing to open its doors at 7 a.m. because it knows people are going to get up that early to watch a game, that's not normal.
Well, the pictures of the street in front of Amsterdam Tavern when the U.S. played in the World Cup, it was unbelievable.
Yeah, you would have thought Obama just got elected again. I mean, it was like presidential
World War
parade.
II,
Oh, it was crazy. And we ventured down. I've been going there for so long. It's a joke because I'm very tight with the owners there. I don't go for the big games. I can't. I want to watch the game. I want to enjoy the game. And every now and then I want to curse at the TV and not feel like an idiot. It's so packed down there. But it's really indicative of where soccer is in St. Louis.
Yes.
Because you go over there, you have individuals ranging from yourself and Jim Leaker, going all the way down to you've got a whole bunch of fresh 21-year-olds that are driving in from Springfield, Illinois or Cape Girardeau, Missouri, because St. Louis is broader, from a broad standpoint, a soccer hub. But you have places like Amsterdam that they're Mecca. It's so much fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you'll see that in other cities, but again, the difference is, tell me how many players you developed.
Yeah.
And if you look at the back of my book and look at not just the national team players, but the people who played in the North American Soccer League, that was a foreign-dominated league, and almost 5% of that entire league was from St. Louis.
Oh, that's crazy.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, the list is like more than 100 guys who played in the NASL. So, and 90 national championships. I mean, just look at the facts. That tells you what kind of city St. Louis is as far as soccer goes.
Yeah, and we've got a 25-year late start to the game in the MLS league. So see how quickly we can outpace our, quote, rivals.
Yes.
In the trophy case.
That's going to be interesting.
You know what? It's not going to take 25 years for us to, match their trophies. That's my prediction early on. Dave, thank you for your time. Really enjoyed this. Let's quickly remind everybody all the usual suspects, title, and where can they buy it? Yep. Because you need to sell some books, right?
Soccer Made in St. Louis: The History of the Game in America's First Soccer Capital.
Only can we edition 3? Can we do St. Louis's only soccer?
Yes,
capital?
I'm hoping edition 3 we can change the subtitle. That'd be great, wouldn't it?
That's awesome.
From Reedy Press, it's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, local bookstores, Schnucks. So it's around. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well. You're welcome anytime to come back on the show. Hit us up if you got anything you want to talk about. We got plenty of other people we can throw you on and have a chat with. I'm sure it would be good for the 3rd edition or a recap of what they've already told you.
Great. And my Twitter handle is Soccer Made in STL. I'm on Facebook, David Lange. So that's where I put my daily Today in St. Louis Soccer History bits. So,
Dave, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And good luck with the book.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure I'll see you at the stadium. And adios. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Take care.